There's three sides to every story: yours, mine, and the truth. Welcome to the Triangle Report. I'm Michael Wintemute. I've been asked why I created the Triangle Report, and I decided to start doing articles on things that interest me and obviously can be popular at any given time. Um, One of the things with the internet and the growth of social media has been a lot of people like myself now that are creating podcasts and newscasts and reporting information on the internet. And this information is much more accessible than news used to be, and it's much more instant and on much more diverse topics and perspectives. Now, I do a written article first to research and make sure I have information that hopefully is factual and true to the best of my ability. The growth of the internet has allowed us to have virtually instant news, but there's no code of conduct really for the internet, and I'm going to talk about how the news evolved and what journalism really is, and I'm going to have two parts to this because the history of it takes a little bit of time. So how did we get here? The history of news reporting has been traced back to ancient Rome, where they would have daily acts or daily records, as they would call them, and they were either carved in stone or metal and would be displayed publicly in prominent locations in and around Rome. This served as an early newspaper or bulletin to inform the citizens about current political decisions, legal proceedings, military victories, and other information considered noteworthy happenings. From the time of the Romans until the invention of the Gutenberg press in about 1440, news mostly contained local information, with word of mouth being the primary source of news. News from returning merchants, sailors, and travelers was brought back to the mainland, where it was picked up by peddlers and traveling players, who would spread the news from town to town. While ancient scribes often wrote this information down, the news was highly unreliable, and word of mouth news eventually died out with the invention of the printing press. In 1556, the government of Venice published what was considered the first monthly newsletter or written notice, which cost at that time what one gazzetta, which was a Venetian coin at the time. From this term, the word translated to English is gazette, which was used for official or semi-official newspapers or government notices. Today, the word gazette is a traditional term for small, regular published news sheets, and many newspapers adopted the name due to its historical significance and recognition. The handwritten newsletter of this time were used to communicate political, military, and economic news quickly and efficiently throughout Europe, but more specifically Italy during the 15 to 1800s, known as the early modern era. While they shared some of the characteristics of newspapers, none of these publications fully met the modern criteria for proper newspapers, as they were not intended for general public and restricted to a certain range of topics. By the 1400s, Italian and German businessmen were compiling handwritten chronicles of news events they considered important to their business and would circulate these to their business connections. Around the 1600s, the idea of using a printing press for this material first appeared in Germany. Early publications were called trade fair reports, or semi-annual news compilations that the large book fairs of Frankfurt and Leipzig would use starting in the 1580s. In 1605, what is believed to be the first true newspaper was started in Strasbourg, a weekly publication, what was called a collection of all distinguished and memorable news. By 1650, there were 30 German cities with active gazettes, including Frankfurt, Berlin, and Hamburg. Antwerp became the hub of two established networks for circulating between newsletters, one linking France, Britain, Germany, and the Netherlands, while the other linked Italy, Spain, and Portugal. The most popular topics included war, military affairs, diplomacy, court business, and gossip. In 1622, the publication called A Current of General News was published and distributed in England, a weekly magazine. By the 19th century, revolutionary changes were taking place in the newspaper business. The rapid expansion of public elementary education meant a vast increase in the number of potential readers. High-speed presses and inexpensive wood-based newsprint made larger and greater circulation possible. While political parties sponsored newspapers at local and national levels, it was the introduction of advertising towards the end of the century that became the main source of revenue for newspaper owners. This changed the focus to going after the largest possible circulation and downplaying partisanship to attract supporters and members of all political parties in order to get them to buy a newspaper. During the 1860s and 1870s, the number of newspapers in Europe held steady at about 6,000. The standard layout was 4 pages of editorial, reprinted speeches, excerpts from both novels and poetry, and limited local ads. Newspapers were still expensive. Most readers went to a cafe to check out the latest issue. Major cities such as London had a national paper, but they were also expensive and directed to the national political elite. However, every decade the presses became faster, cheaper wood pulp replaced the more expensive rag papers, and the introduction of automatic typesetting in the 1880s made overnight printing of a large morning paper feasible. By 1900, the number of newspapers in Europe had doubled to 12,000. There were also major cultural innovations such as the professionalization of news gathering handled by specialist reporters. Liberalism led to freedom of the press and ended newspaper taxes as well as a sharp reduction in government censorship. Politicians interested in putting forth their party positions were replaced by entrepreneurs interested in profit, which created a dramatic outreach to a larger subscription base. In New York, the price fell to a penny, and with the introduction of yellow journalism, eye-catching headlines and sensationalized exaggerations, comics, and such emphasis on team sports and crime, as well as vastly expanded advertising sections featuring major department stores, helped increase sales. Women who had been previously ignored were now given multiple advice columns on such topics as family, household, and fashion issues, and the advertising was increasingly pitched to them. By the 1840s, the telegraph was playing a significant role in business, news, and diplomacy as it allowed for faster and more efficient transmission of information over long distances. The first telephone exchanges were established in the 1880s, allowing multiple phones to be connected. As technology expanded, the use of the telephone, teleprinter, the transmission of photography, and continued advancements in printing press technology all benefited the newspaper industry. A story breaking anywhere in the world could be in the lead headline in the following morning or afternoon edition. Radio broadcasting began in the 1920s, and by the 1940s, radio had reached its peak as a radio was a fixture in almost every home. While the television was an experimental study prior to World War II, it became operational in the late 1940s, and by the 1950s and into the 1960s, largely displaced the radio for home entertainment. Both the radio and television provided news, but the newspaper was still the dominant choice as a primary news source. The competition with radio and then television caused newspapers to focus on investigative journalism, gaining popularity by exposing corruption and social problems. News gathering had adhered to an industry code of ethics for decades, but discussions during World War II believed broadcasters and journalists had a special measure of freedom and had an obligation to society to use their freedom and powers responsibly. The United States formed a commission during World War II, officially called the Commission on Freedom of the Press, also known as the Hutchins Report or Hutchins Commission. After 4 years of deliberation, the Commission published its report in 1947 stating, "A free and responsible press plays an important role in the development and stability of modern society, and as such, it is imperative that a commitment of social responsibility be imposed on the mass media." Based on the Hutchins Commission report, it suggested guidelines specifically for the press, as well as provide the framework and inspiration for what became the Fourth Estate, Journalism Code of Practice, and the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. These codes of practice offered clear and detailed guidance for anyone seeking to create ethical, principled journalism, regardless of their background, employment status, or means of delivery. The code was not just relevant for professional journalists, but also for those outside the profession who believed in honest and fair reporting on events and issues that were relevant in their community. So the fourth estate, or the journalism code of practice. I've got them in detail in the written article, but I'm just going to touch on them for the video. So the first one's accuracy, and accuracy is the overriding value of journalism. So ensure that all the facts in your work are accurate, and don't omit facts that are material to an understanding of what you are reporting on. Independence. You want to be independent from state control, business interests, market forces, or any other vested interests or outside pressures is a hallmark of the dispassionate, critical, and reliable journalism. Don't allow yourself to be influenced by political, sectional, or commercial interests. Impartiality, which means not being prejudiced towards or against any particular ideology, idea, or preconception. Impartiality requires fairness and balance that follows the weight of the evidence. It allows the journalist to make sense of events through dispassionate analysis of all relevant facts and perspectives. Integrity. Integrity in journalism ensures that people and organizations uphold the values of journalism, always striving to do the right thing in all situations, even to their professional or organizational detriment, and to put their obligations to the public first. Journalists must always remember that they are dealing with human lives. The potential for public good must sufficiently outweigh the potential for harm that may come from the activity of journalism. Engagement with the public ensures that journalism remains open, accessible, collaborative, and participatory while keeping the journalistic accountable to the highest standard of accuracy, independence, impartiality, and integrity. Establish and maintain open communications with the community. Accountability is essential to the ethical practice of journalism and the maintenance of the public trust. Being accountable for news gathering practices and reporting means making firm commitments and taking responsibility for your journalism and the journalism of your peers. In the world of journalism, who monitors these rules? The simple answer is in newsprint, it is the editor or a group of editors that review the articles and make sure the rules have been followed. Often the publisher will sit in on these meetings. In broadcast news, it would be news editors and producers. The movie, All the President's Men, is a very good example of what is involved in investigative journalism. Two reporters with the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, investigated the break-in at the Democratic National Headquarters in the Watergate building. Their investigation eventually led to the Republican Party and the resignation of the president. It was imperative that the two reporters had at least two sources to back up their claim, and the relentless effort they took in order to get written confirmation from these sources. The rapid growth of the internet, especially after 2000, now offers free news and classified advertising to online audiences, which has eroded paid subscriptions and local advertising models of many newspapers. Major newspapers have either gone out of business or scaled back their news gathering and shrinking their staff in order to survive. Even these actions have not resolved the challenges that they continue to face. Television broadcast news was already dealing with the expansion of cable news networks, which created more competition for advertising dollars. As television was already a broadcast medium, the transition to news online was easier and offered them the opportunity to tap into internet advertising dollars. Some newsprint publications are also creating internet podcasts to generate income. However, over the past 25 years, internet podcasters have grown and become a strong source of news and information delivery. Internet and digital media can deliver instant updates and spread information, knowledge, and ideas to a large audience. So the challenges we face are often called fake news and disinformation. The proliferation of online platforms has led to the spread of misinformation and the erosion of trust in traditional news outlets. There's no editor, publisher, or producer to fact check user generated content. The rules related to the internet do not apply to journalistic accuracy, integrity, or accountability. Now, there are rules with respect to harmful content that could victimize an adult or child. You must be responsible for harmful content and make it inaccessible. General duties and operators to act responsibly and make certain content inaccessible. Those types of rules, as well as copyright rules, trademark rules, etc. In 1990, most of us did not know the word internet, let alone what it meant. Today, it's almost impossible to live without it. When you would be at your local supermarket standing at the checkout, you would see tabloid newspapers known for their celebrity gossip, crime news, and investigative reporting, but not recognized as a source for accurate and researched news. To some degree, they were considered fake news, although we never used that term. Since the growth of the internet, the term fake news has replaced such responses to issues as, I don't agree with that comment, or the facts do not support those claims, to name a couple. The words fake news roll off the tongues of politicians, business leaders, and internet influencers that don't like questions or have answers to a question that would most likely be a lie. I hope you have enjoyed my brief history lesson on journalism. What is Journalism 2? We'll cover more about fake news, and it'll have some examples to think about. Thank you for taking time to watch this video today. I appreciate it.